Tyler Lystash. I'm the Rio Chama Active Water Resource Management Manager, AWRM Manager for the Rio Chama Basin. So I'm in charge of the water masters. Before I was the Upper Rio Chama Water Master, and then for a little bit I was just the Rio Chama Water Master because I was the only person on the river. I've been working in water rights for the last decade, starting with the Nature Conservancy, then the state of Montana. Then I was a hydrologist in Virginia, and then I came to New Mexico. I've always just loved rivers. Growing up in Virginia, I rafted and canoed on the New River, and it's just always been something I enjoy. And so, trying to get a job that meets the environmental science background I had, and getting out on rivers was something I was looking into. Management on the Chama varies with the flow of the river. So in the spring, even in the winter before the runoff, it's more meetings with the acequias and interested groups to plan for the coming season, get things in order. Then April, once the irrigation season starts, we're going out, turning on our measurement stations, checking stations, doing more acequia meetings, just making sure everything is running smoothly. Then as the river starts to drop, we're communicating with the associations, Okewinge, the individual acequias, about the coming triggers. And then as those triggers come, we implement the sharing agreement. And that's when the real work of a water master starts. And that's when we're calling mayordomos to turn down, or we're physically turning them down. It's when we start going after illegal and unpermitted diversions to make sure nobody's taking water off the river without a permit or water right. So typically in June or July, our job becomes much more field-based than office-based, and water masters are out on the Chama every day. Traditionally, the trigger for the lower Chama to go into curtailment has been 50 cubic feet per second at the USGS station La Puente, which is up near El Vado. That trigger, nobody really knows where it came from, but the assumption is that since 1972, 100 CFS has been the estimated demand of the lower Chama. To meet their full demand, you need 100 CFS at Abiquiu. And so if there's at 50 CFS, because the acequias have high returns to the river, once there's only 50, if there's no management, then we would very, very likely be impairing downstream users. Because if we're taking 100, even with generous return flows, at that point we're taking other people's water. So that's where the 50 CFS triggers come from. We now do some management before 50, but the main triggers are 100, 70, and 50 for different steps in management. The state engineer's office got involved in the Rio Chama in the early 1970s because of the San Juan Chama project. When that project came through, to get the congressional funding, the state had to ensure that project water would make it to the project contractors, that it wouldn't be taken by non-project users on the Rio Chama. And so again, for those who don't know, the project takes water from some Colorado River Basin drainages, and it goes through the Azotea Tunnel and drops it into the Chama River and Heron Reservoir. And so to do that, we started the adjudication proceedings of all the water rights on the Rio Chama, and then the federal court ordered a water master under the state engineer to manage the diversions of the lower Chama, which is the area below Abiquiu, to ensure that those project deliveries are not impacted. So that's where it started. Back in the 1970s, it was all priority administration, strict priority administration. There was no shortage sharing, and the involvement of tributaries and the upper diverters was not a thing until way more recently. And that type of management regime really stayed from 1972 to the 2000 teens. We're located probably 4 to 5 river miles down from Abiquiu Dam at the top diversion for the Rio Chama Acequia Association of Beta Trujillo. So we're actually sitting on the buried ditch. So we're sitting, doing this interview on the acequia. About 8 CFS of water is running underneath us to 300 acres of farmland with a priority date going back to the 1700s. A water master will help. I mean, mayordomos today, just to make it by, many people can't just farm anymore. They have second jobs, they're doing other things. So water masters will just help a mayordomo out if needed. So if a ditch can't adjust, and often we have to adjust because the ABAQ release changes for downstream users. Those project users that I was talking about earlier, they'll change their call. The river will go up. So everybody's head gates were adjusted in the morning. If they stay at that level, they're going to be taking other people's water. But because the adjustment came out at 10 a.m., they're all at work. And so the water masters will go and make those adjustments if the ditch wants us to. We're helped with some disputes sometimes. But yeah, it's really just making sure the gates are at the right level and helping a ditch get there, calling them when needed, doing it ourselves when needed. And then, our biggest thing right now is just, there's a lot of, especially in the upper basin above El Vado, a lot of use that is not permitted. And so right now that's our biggest drive, because it's just unfair for the farmers in the Pueblo down here and the farmers up there to be shorted water when there's unpermitted diversions occurring in the basin. So right now we're doing a lot of enforcement on the Rio Chama. A call in Western states is a priority call. It's a call on the river. A traditional call, a senior user typically will send in a letter to the state, and they typically have to send the letter to the people being called on, initiating the call. Under alternative administration, under AWRM, alternative administration is a variety of priority call. And so it's a call that the sharing parties have agreed to kind of beforehand, and the rules of the call aren't as strict. And so kind of a way to think about it is the seniors down here, their combined maximum diversion rate is 136.5 CFS. So they own that much of the river. Owinge has 18 CFS. The other senior sekes each have their own allotment, and it goes up. And so once there's under 136.5 CFS of native water in this river, that water is all owned by these users. So what they can do through alternative administration is say, hey, junior users upstream, or even junior users down here, this ditch is junior to ditches downstream from here, even with a 1735 priority. The seniors can say, you can have some of our water, our priority date 1600 water on Tuesday and Thursday. And so a call is just implementing priority administration. It's saying the seniors are laying their claim to the water, but alternative administration through shorter sharing is letting the seniors decide how their water is shared. And so like in a different state, a priority call, the water has to go to that senior user. In this state, the senior user can make a priority call, but kind of distribute the water throughout the community. You can always make a shorter sharing agreement. I think AWRM helps because it gives the acequias and the Pueblo kind of a trusted third party to make sure everybody's playing by the rules, kind of like a referee. When you don't have a water master, I mean, we still get the calls today ourselves. When you don't have a third party, people start to lose trust. You see the river go down, right? Maybe the users down here see USGS La Puente drop, and they question, are the farmers up there committed to their cuts, or are they taking the water? Is that why the river is going down? So with AWRM, you have the state providing resources to guarantee that everybody is doing their part. And I think that makes senior parties more willing to share with those junior parties. And I think what's really important on this river is there's a lot of senior users that missed out at different opportunities on the Rio Chama to have their say. And they've asked the state many times to be treated in fairly. I would just say that's all they want. And AWRM is kind of the first time, especially in the last few years, that they've been getting that. But there's still ways that they're not being treated fairly. And I think it's important for people to start those discussions. And so one of them is the illegal uses. And I don't think many people realize it, but I have 380 ponds that have been built in the headwaters of the Rio Chama without a permit. Some of them in federally designated wetlands, some of them on perennial streams. All of them just recreational, aesthetic, fishery things. And, it's an administrative nightmare to get these removed. They're all incredibly wealthy, politically connected people. And so getting those gone is difficult, but I think that's really important to let people know, you can't just move up to the mountains and treat water like it's readily available. It's somebody's water downstream. Secondly, the contract water that we've talked about, there's set rules that were created. And one of those set rules is fixed loss rates on the river for SJC water. Contract water pays 1% when it travels between Elvado and Abiquiu. So a couple weeks ago, there's a 10% loss on the Rio Chama. A couple weeks ago, Elvado was releasing 200 and 180 was making it to Abiquiu. Of that 250 was native Rio Chama water, right? So 150 contract water. So of that 20 CFS loss, 1.5 CFS was contract loss, and the other 18.5 was paid by the native water. Today, Elvado is releasing 500, and the native water is around 50. Only 450 is making it to Abiquiu. So it's still 10% loss, but there's more water. So the Corps is telling us, because it's a 1% loss, they only pay 4.5 of that 50, and the remaining 45.5 is native water that was just evaporated between the two reservoirs. And that results at times where we're told by the agencies running the dams that there's no water for the RCAA, there's no water for Okewinge, and things like that. I think the conversation needs to be had about how to fix kind of those historic accounting injustices that ignored this part of the valley. And these are things that the Acequias have been saying for a long time, and I think the water masters have to work so closely with the Acequias and Okewinge that we hear them. And so because of AWRM, it's harder for the state engineer to ignore those after you've been working on these type of agreements for years. Like the pond enforcement, the Acequias up north, the Acequias Norteñas, they gave me a 2004 resolution that they gave to the legislature at the Roundhouse, to the state engineer, asking for enforcement against illegal ponds. And there was nothing done. And now we're actively doing it. So I just think AWRM, people might not want the state or trust the state in their basin, but I think having a referee is good, and I think having the state be personally involved in these local agreements makes the state want to make it fair, which is what's right. And we can't pretend that things are wrong when we're so involved.